Hey everybody, welcome to the Jesus in a Dream podcast, where we believe with Jesus in a Dream, anything is possible, nothing is impossible, and the possibilities are endless. I'm Caleb, and this is Zach.
Hello, everybody.
And we want you to enjoy life and build God's kingdom. We have a special guest today, but before I introduce him, I just want to encourage you, if you're liking or watching this on YouTube, if you could like this for us and subscribe. And if you're listening to this on the Apple podcast, would you leave us a review? Tell us your thoughts. Helps us out, helps us help more people. And we would be forever grateful if you did that. So thank you. Today, on Jesus in a Dream, there's lots of different types of dreams, and I think in the past we have kind of focused on some creative things and some business things, but something that I'm passionate about, and I think a lot of other people are passionate about and dream about, is family. And I'm single, I dream about meeting somebody, getting married, having a family, the whole shebang. And I think a lot of other people dream about that too. That is not an uncommon dream, and I believe God cares about those dreams, and God plants those dreams, and God leads us forward in those dreams as well. And so we're not just talking about anything that has to do with like career, hobbies, but anything that is in your heart that you believe God has placed there. That is what this podcast is for. And so we want to try to do our best to cover a plethora of topics, but also believe that in each episode, even if they are more specified, that you can grab something, because we're really trying to base this on biblical principles and values and truths that should apply just to life in general. And so with that being said, I have one of my best pals, Josh Bogaczyk. Actually, how do you say your name?
Josh Bogaczyk.
Yeah, so Josh Bogaczyk is here. And Josh and I went to college together at North Central University. Rams.
Go Rams.
Go Rams. And Josh has quite the story. And if you clicked on this, obviously you saw the title and were intrigued. And so today's episode is going to be a little bit different. I'm just going to let Josh kind of introduce himself a little more, and then he is going to tell his story. And then we're going to kind of discuss that. But if you didn't look at the title and you clicked on this, I just want to give you a fair warning that we're going to cover some pretty heavy topics today, but believe that the things that we talk about can give you truth and breakthrough for your life, especially in really hard situations. So, Josh, I'm going to throw it over to you, and you can just take it away.
Cool. Well, like Caleb said, my name is Josh Bogaczyk. 28 years old. Born and raised in the great state of Minnesota. Love all different kinds of sports. The Pittsburgh Steelers are kind of what brought me and Caleb together.
Here we go.
Here we go. So yeah, I'm just a normal guy with a pretty abnormal story. But yeah, I like Caleb said, met him at North Central University a few years back, and our friendship kind of got off to a little bit of a rocky start at the beginning.
Did. Yep.
We can go into that another time, but no, I always saw something great in Caleb, and knew that he was going to impact the world. And in some way or another, didn't know really what that looked like, but here we are at MyMountain recording Jesus in a Dream podcast. And first, I just want to say thanks for the opportunity, Zach and Caleb. It's always a privilege when I get to share my story. And specifically, Caleb, thanks for being such a great friend and a great person and an inspiration to many. I know your ministry has impacted hundreds and thousands of people, and I just want to say thank you for just being obedient to what God has called you to do in your life.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, I'm just going to kind of jump in to my story a little bit. It's a long one. If you like roller coasters, I always say this. This is going to be a roller coaster story, so buckle up. But I hope that it brings some hope to your day and some joy to your day when it's all said and done. So, yeah, we're just gonna start. My wife, or I should say, back at North Central, when I was with Caleb, friends with Caleb, I was kind of searching for a relationship. And Caleb had a solid group of friends already, and there was a girl who was in our friend group that I always found was very interesting and very just seemed like a very genuine and really amazing person. And the more and more I hung out with Caleb, the more and more I started hanging out with this girl, his friend Mallory, and we, hit it off as friends. We were really close. Just loved being together, doing life together, just sharing about each other's dreams and sharing about just what we did on the day to day. And started off as a very innocent friendship, but eventually over time it got more and more serious, and I started to see maybe a potential future with Mallory and with this person. So, I was still young and still had some things to figure out, so I didn't pursue a relationship right away with her. But over time, it was undeniable that I started to grow very strong feelings for this person. And one thing led to another, and, I messed up and didn't, give her a chance, and just, was just not really a good person. But eventually Jesus came into my life, figured my stuff out, and I asked her to be my girlfriend, and she said yes, amazingly. And it was a very strong, very awesome relationship. And then, I am a YWAMer. I went off to do YWAM, and
really quick, explain it just for people.
Yeah, YWAM is called Youth with a Mission. It's one of the largest missionary organizations in the world, with bases all over the world, in every country, actually. And you first do a DTS, Discipleship Training School. It's kind of the first thing to get you involved in YWAM. So that's what I did. I felt really called to do that. So I went to YWAM Pittsburgh, and just fell in love with Jesus even more than I was. Really figured out what my relationship with him looked like. And also that's where I really, felt like I was supposed to pursue this relationship with Mallory, and that's what I did. So did YWAM, was dating Mallory. She actually went off to do her own YWAM, because I really felt like it was important for us to kind of have similar, experiences with our faith going forward. And she was all for it, and she went and did her own, and she came back and I came back, and we got engaged, and it was awesome, and loved being engaged. And not too long after that, we got married, and man, it was amazing. I'd met the woman of my dreams. I'd met, the person that I was going to spend the rest of my life with. We actually went out to Pittsburgh to join staff with YWAM. We really felt like we were supposed to serve the local community out there, and that's what we did. And we were there for 2 years, and we had so many amazing opportunities and so many amazing stories that we shared together out there. And yeah, it was something that I would never trade anything for. And we felt like after our 2 years was up that it was really time for us to move back to Minnesota. But we didn't really have an excuse as to why to do that. Our 2 years was up. That was good, but we really felt like we needed something else. And we were kind of trying for a kid, to have a baby, and, weren't seeing a lot of success. And we're like, God, if this is your will, we really feel like we're supposed to go home. We just need an answer. We just need a reason. And after a couple months of praying about it and trying to figure out, why we should come back to Minnesota, we found out that we were expecting a baby. So that was it. That was our reason to come home and to be closer to family and friends. And so we did. We talked to our YWAM leaders about it, and they were open and cool with it. So we packed our stuff up in August of 2019, and moved back to the great state of Minnesota. So we were, back in Minnesota, August 2019, just living at my parents' house, trying to figure out what work looked like. And, Mallory was really pregnant. She was, just pretty far along. So it wasn't probably wise for her to get a job since she'd be going on maternity leave anyways. So I got a job as a para professional at Fridley Middle School. And was just helping out there, working there. And, I was, just going through the motions, going to work. It wasn't my favorite job in the world, but it helped kind of pay the bills that we had and helped with, financial stability. So, October came around and, we were starting to plan for baby and starting to plan for the next steps and what that looked like. And I remember I had gone to work. It was October 11th. I had gone into work like a normal morning, normal day. Mallory had gone over to a friend's house to help them with a move. They were moving across the country, so she was just going to go over and help them pack some things up and get some things together. So I was at work doing my thing, and the friend that Mallory was helping had given me a call, and I was like, oh, they must have just accidentally called me. So I didn't answer. Then she left a voicemail, and I was working, so I didn't really get a chance to look at it. And then I got another call, and I was like, okay, maybe something's going on. So I removed myself from what I was doing and called this person back. And they had said that Mallory had been in an accident, but she's okay and she's stable, but you need to get to the hospital as soon as you can. So in my mind, I was like, oh shoot, yeah, I need to leave this. I need to go and be with my wife and be there for her and, help her with whatever she needs. So I told all the people I was working with that I needed to go. And I got in my car, went to Hennepin County Medical Center, got to the front desk. They're like, how can we help you? I was like, well, my wife was in an accident. I was just told to come here. Where should I go? They're like, well, the emergency room's over here. If you want to go over there, we'll tell the nurses and the doctors that you're here if you just want to wait. So I was like, okay, sounds good. So I went into the waiting room and was just sitting there and waiting for someone to come and get me or someone to bring me back to see my wife. And it was like 15, 20 minutes went by. Nothing happened. I was like, okay, this is a little weird. So the first person I actually called was Caleb, because Caleb was best friends with Mallory before I even knew who she was. So I was like, hey, Caleb, Mallory was in an accident. She's okay, but I'm just at Hennepin County Medical Center. So if you want to just pray for the situation, or if you want to come hang out with me and just be with me, that'd be great. And Caleb, without hesitation, was like, oh yeah, I'm there. I'll be there as soon as I can. So he came over and I called my mom, and, she came and was with us. And it was like after half an hour of sitting there, one of the emergency room doctors came out, and they're like, Josh, we just want you to come back and wait in this waiting room back here with us, if that's okay. I was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. So they brought me back there, and, we had started to text and call other people to just kind of let them know that Mallory was in an accident, but, everything was okay. But we're just at the hospital if you want to come and hang out with us. And, a lot of people started to show up and just hang with us. And, after I felt like about 2 or 3 hours of sitting there, but in reality, it was probably only 10 to 15 minutes. One of the doctors, or actually I shouldn't say one, there was 5 doctors, came into this room with me, and they sat down, and in my mind, I'm like, man, like I feel like I've seen this in movies before, where doctors come into a room and, they never have good news to share. It's always bad news. So I see all these doctors come in, and I'm like, man, I thought everything was okay. And so in my mind, I started to prepare myself that, oh, maybe the baby that, was still inside Mallory, something happened and she wasn't able to make it, and she lost her life. So in my mind, I was already preparing to hear those words. And so they sat down, and I sat down, and they took their masks off and looked at me, and they're like, "Josh, we have some bad news to share with you." And I was like, "Okay. Well, what's the news?" Expecting to hear that my daughter, Minnie was her name, had passed away. And so that's what I was ready to hear. And they said, "Okay, well, Mallory actually is gone." And it took me a second to kind of realize what they said. I don't know if people have experienced this, but when you hear something or when you hear really bad news, it feels like the whole world just kind of comes to a stop and like nothing's moving. And that's what I experienced when they told me that. I just sat in my seat for a few seconds and I said, "What do you mean Mallory's gone?" And they walked me through what happened, and I don't know if you want me to share all the details, but there was an accident at the house, and she had lost a lot of blood, and on the way to the hospital, they were trying to contain the amount of blood that she was losing. But at the rate that she was losing it, they had a choice to make, and that was either to try to save Mallory or try to save the baby. And so that's what they chose to do. They chose to save the baby, my daughter Minnie, and during that process, Mallory had lost too much blood where they couldn't bring her back. And that's what they had told me. And for those of you that know me, Caleb knows me pretty well. I'm not a very angry person. I'm normally pretty optimistic, normally a pretty happy person. But when they told me that news, I felt this rush of anger rush through my body like I had never experienced before in my life. I remember getting up and I remember just slamming my fist against one of the cupboards that they had there. And my fist still hurts till this day. I will vividly remember it. And I just remember screaming, why, over and over and over again. And I didn't have the answers. There was the one time in my life where everything that I had and everything that I felt like I had worked so hard for, it was just gone. And I didn't have the answers for it. And I felt so hopeless. And after about 5 minutes just screaming, I sat down in the chair and I just closed my eyes and I just remember this peace rushing through me. Like the anger had started in my head, went out of my toes, and then this peace came in through my head and just rested. And Caleb can attest to this. I just started praying for the nurses and the doctors in the waiting room. And I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this, but can I just pray for you? And they're like, you're not supposed to be praying for us. We're supposed to be helping you and praying for you. I was like, I just really feel like I need to pray for you guys. And that's what I did. And I don't know why. Till this day, I don't know why I did that. It didn't make any sense. But I just started praying for the nurses and the doctors. And once I got done praying, I stood up and they're like, oh, we forgot to tell you that we actually were able to save Minnie's life. She's on life support. We don't see much brain activity, but she is alive and she's upstairs in the NICU. And if you want to go up there and see her, we can do that. And so I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I need to go. I need to be with her. I need to see her. And that's what I did. And that's what we did. And like I had said, we had been texting some friends and family, and by the time all the news was shared and all of the, information got out, we probably had 20 to 30 people at the hospital with us. So we were all able to go up to the NICU and spend some time with my baby girl, with Minnie. And we got 4 days with her. And it was probably hands down the hardest thing I'll ever go through in my entire life. But I also say this, it was one of the most beautiful experiences that I've ever had in my entire life. We came together as a family and as a community, and just as people who who had one focus, and that was to just share Jesus with whoever we could in that hospital. And we did. We impacted all of the nurses that we came into contact with. I still have contact with them today. I talk to them quite often. And we were just able to sing songs, and we were able to just impact that area of the hospital like it had probably never been impacted before. And yeah, it was just a time of prayer and worship and community and fellowship like a lot of people probably have never experienced before in my life, and in their life as well. So that's that part of the story. We had a service, a celebration of life for Mallory and Minnie. It was full of tears, full of different emotions, happiness, joy, but also sorrow and sadness. But because we were such a close family, it felt okay to experience all of those feelings together. And that's what we did. So, yeah, that's pretty much my story about that. So,
well, thank you for sharing that, Josh. Yeah. Thank you for being here today. And what would you say to somebody who might be listening to this? Because I have a feeling this is going to be sent to people are going to listen to this, and they're going to know people who are going through disappointment, going through the valley. Can you just maybe speak to what did you learn as you look back and you see like your dreams literally died. Yeah. And you know, not everybody goes through that, but a lot of people do go through their dreams crumbling around them, like you said, and not being able to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Well, let's take this one step at a time. I'll ask a very specific question. How have you dealt with not allowing yourself to go, this was my fault?
Yeah, it's a good question. And if I were to tell you that I've never had those thoughts, I would, you know, that would be a lie. There were times, you know, shortly after, a few days after that happening, the accident happening, that I thought to myself, like, this was me. You know, if I would have just said, no, you don't need to go help, or just stay home, or, you know, if we would have stayed in Pittsburgh, what would have happened? You know, and a lot of, we can always ask the what ifs. We can always ask, you know, what if this, what if that? But at the end of the day, it happened, and we have to be okay with not knowing the what ifs. We have to be okay with not knowing the whys of why this tragedy happened. So I definitely did have those thoughts. I had those feelings. But like I had shared, yes, I had Jesus in my life. Absolutely. You know, I love the Lord. I was on fire for him. But at that time, I felt so distant from him, because how can a loving God let this happen to me? You know, my whole life is gone. My dreams, my wife, you know, my baby was not with us for a very long time. How could God do that to me? And I was constantly reminded by people, by family, that it's going to be okay. I don't know how it's going to be okay. My whole life is gone. How is it going to be okay? I don't even know if the people that shared that it was going to be okay really believed that it was going to be okay. But because they told me it's going to be okay, we're here. We're here. We're going to be here. We're always here. We're never going to let you go. Whether you know, move on and find another wife, or if whatever happens, you know, we're never going to just let you go. We're here. And whenever you're sad, whenever you're mad, call us, text us. We'll come and be with you. So many people told me that it was, in my mind, I was like, okay, people aren't just saying this to say, like, because it's the right thing to say. People were saying this because they genuinely believed it and genuinely meant what they were saying. And that's what got me through the thoughts of, you know, is this my fault? What would have happened if this would have happened or that would have happened? It was the people that were around me that Jesus put in my life very strategically to remind me that there's hope. There's more than this. This doesn't have to be the end, but this can be the beginning. This can be the beginning of an amazing story and an amazing just testimony of God's goodness. So hopefully that answered your question, that, you know, the people that were around me really pointed me to the hope that there is something better out there for me. So
that's really good. Let me ask you this. So after the initial, obviously, disappointment, trauma, just emotional waves of grief, once you felt like, I know, like, not, it's impossible to say normal, but once you felt like you were able to think clearly, maybe for yourself, maybe you did this well, or maybe you didn't do this well, but could you share with our listeners, like, once they get past the initial, like, disappointment and like grief and mourning period of their dreams, whatever that might be, what would you say would be just a great next step once you're able to think clearly about what's next in your life?
Yeah, that's good. For me, and again, this isn't for everyone. So if this isn't for you, I get it. But for me, that next step after I could think clearly was to seek out counseling and to seek out, I don't want to call it therapy, because it didn't feel like therapy to me. It just felt like counsel, wise counsel. I was going to church, and they had connections with an amazing counselor, and they got me connected with him. And I know some people don't have those certain connections, but I would strongly recommend seeking out that counseling. I wouldn't necessarily say do it right away, because everything's still so fresh and so raw, and there are going to be days where, you know, you don't want to talk to anybody. And so what I would say is seek out that counseling when you have come to, back to a little bit of, okay, you know, I can think clearly, but how do I process this going forward? Because you can have all these friends, all these family, like I had talked about in your life, that are, you know, encouraging you and you know, telling you to keep going. But it gets to a point where it's like, okay, you know, this is all good, but I need to figure out how to do that, how to get to those next steps. And counseling for me was 100% what worked for me the most. And it helped me tremendously, because I had all this encouragement. You know, I was like, yeah, you know, life's going to be good. It's going to move on. We're going to be okay, you know, but how do I do that? And so when I went through this counseling, my counselor was able to walk me through those next steps on what life could look like after. There was goals that he set for me and goals that I had set for myself. And, but there were days where it was hard. It was so hard. Like, I would just sit in his office, in my counselor's office, and just cry and cry and cry, because I didn't know, like, it was just hard. So know that it's, once you can think clearly, once you can, you know, grasp what happened, you know, and you seek that counseling, it's not, you know, you're not just going to be happy-go-lucky, you know, let the emotions come. And in our society, we like to teach that, you know, it's okay to not be okay. And a lot of the times that's where people leave it. It's like, yeah, if you're not okay, that's okay. But I like to take it the next step is, you know, it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. And counseling was the one that kind of helped me get to that point of, you know, I'm not okay, and that's okay, but how are we going to get better, and how are we going to build, and how are we going to get through this together? So
that's really good. And something I want to encourage everybody listening to this is, you know, Josh's story is extreme. Like, it's about as worse as you can get, but the truth of the matter is, with any dream there's the possibility of a disappointment coming. Yeah. Whether, you know, you've started a business, or your writings got rejected, or you got your heart broken, or whatever it is that you put your you're hoping for, when those things don't happen, it is like a death, and there's a mourning process and there's a grieving process. And something I want to share with people is like, there's nothing too small to seek wise counsel in. Yeah. That if you feel like you are mourning or have mourned or feel paralyzed because of something that you lost, a dream that you lost, maybe it didn't even exist yet, but you feel like it's been taken away from you in any sort of way, find wise counsel, because I'm a person who, disappointment is my vice. Like when I get disappointment, like, and I think the Lord has helped me through this tremendously, and other people have helped me through this tremendously. But I know other people are out there that when you get disappointed, you feel paralyzed. You feel like you just want to quit. You just want to isolate, that life's not worth living, that why did I do this? All of that stuff. And my encouragement to you would be, Josh is completely right. It doesn't have to be a licensed counselor. Find a friend, find a parent, find somebody who goes to your church, and just ask them to speak into your life, because they will say things like, keep going. Yeah. And I believe in you, and the world's going to keep spinning, and it's not always going to be this way. And then have that community around you. But I also want to say, there's nothing too small to go to counseling or therapy for. Yeah. If you're working on a dream and it dies, and you feel like you need to go see a counselor, go see a counselor, because that can destroy your life. And you hear people all the time, well, this and that didn't work out, and now I'm like this. It doesn't have to be that way. So, how do you avoid living in fear now? Because obviously that was very traumatic. How do you combat the fear that I know comes?
Yeah. Man, you're just firing off all the good questions. This is probably good.
It's my job.
It's probably good that you have a podcast. This is good. Again, if I told you I didn't have fear in my life, I'd be lying to your face, because there are still things, sometimes that trigger some things, and I'm still working on it. I'm not a complete person. I'm not, I would like to say that I'm healed of the situation, but there are certain things that happen on a TV show or a movie or whatever that's like, oh, okay, this is a little sensitive for me. But on a day-to-day basis, I have to constantly remind myself that, that you don't need to live in this fear. We have the hope in Jesus Christ that it's gonna be okay. I know that my wife and my daughter are in heaven, and I know that, and that's a promise that I hold on to. And how it happened was horrible and tragic, and it is one of those things that just doesn't normally happen. It was just such a rare thing. But to know that we have that promise of heaven and that promise of an eternal life with our Father, Heavenly Father, that it's going to be okay. And that's what I hold on to. Because if it was just, there's heaven, and that's great. Like if you say it like that, it's like, oh, okay, that's not very hopeful. But to know what heaven is and what is happening in heaven, pain-free, main street of gold, you're with your Heavenly Father that created you, man, that's a promise that I cling to, and that I know that, okay, they went through this tragedy, but man, they're fully healed and fully with Jesus in heaven. And that's, I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but simply that's what I remind myself of, is that, they're in heaven, they're healed in heaven, they're with Jesus. And that's what, keeps me from, living in that fear, of what happened. And like I said, there are times where it's like, okay, that's a little bit too much for me, but yeah, that's my answer for you.
That's good. And I think that's the perfect answer, is that, God is in control. No matter what happens, we might not understand it. It might not make sense to us. It might even be offensive to us. But this is something I tell people all the time, especially when they're reading their Bible, but also when you're going through life experience that are adverse or that are challenges, is that the best thing you can do is, even if what you know of God or what is happening in your life is offensive or feels like you can't comprehend it or you can't understand it, the best thing to do in those moments is just to agree with God. Just say, God, I don't understand this, but I agree with your decision. And that will bring the peace, because you'll realize that He is God and that you are not, and that it's okay to have emotions while you say that. You can angrily say, I agree with your decision, God, but I don't understand it. Or you can, in grief, say, I don't understand this, but I agree with you. And that will help whatever situation you're in, and you'll see God in a better way and in a more intimate way, because he'll meet you in those moments that when you bring your walls down, you can still have all of the emotions without having walls up to God or to other people. And when you do that, that invites intimacy, and that invites a tenderness from, I think, the Holy Spirit that you can't get anywhere else. Last question, because we're going to do part 1 and part 2. We're going to release these for one right after another. But we'll end on this question, and then Josh is going to tell the second half of his story, which is, filled with hope. And this one is too, I believe. But we're 3 years out now. We're almost 3 years as of the time of recording this from Mal and Minnie passing away. As you look back at that time in the hospital, those 4 or 5 days, tell us about how maybe there's some things now that you can see that God was doing that you couldn't see then. And maybe just encourage people if they find themselves in it right now. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say to really embrace the unknown. I know it's a scary thing. I know it's a thing that you might not want to do. And like I was saying earlier, you probably have a lot of these what if questions or why questions. And it's taken me even till this day to fully understand and fully know that you're not going to know the whys. You're not going to know the what ifs. You're not going to know that. And you have to be okay with that. You really do. And once you can get your mind around that, you're going to be able to grow, and you're going to be able to not move on. I don't like the term move on. A lot of people have said, so you're moved on. I'm not moved on. I always will remember Mal and Minnie. They will always be a part of me, and they will always be how I live out my life. But when you can get to the point of not beating yourself up, not asking the what ifs, not asking the whys, but focusing on God, focusing on Jesus, focusing on your friends and family that are around you that are trying to help you with this process, that's when you'll be able to fully heal and fully, start this new chapter of your life. And I wish that was the one thing that, when all of this was happening, I wish we would have been able as a group to just like each tell each other this. Because there's been some people that have taken this tragedy a lot harder than others, and I always try to reach out and remind them that it's okay. You're not going to know the whys, you're not going to know the what ifs, and I'm here, and we're always going to be here for you. And that would kind of be the one thing that I would like to remind the people that are going through something right now, that it's okay to not know the whys, because you're not going to know the whys. You never will until you get to heaven. And then even then, you never know, So that's what I would like to remind people and tell people, is that, you might be going through the worst of the worst, and that's okay. And you're not going to know why. And that's okay too.
But there were some good whys for this happening. Can you just go into some of those of, like, you don't know maybe the whys of all of the whys, but what are some of the whys that you have experienced? Maybe talk about like some of the nurses or the salvations that happened at Mal's celebration of life. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we'll start with the nurses. And so when we were in that waiting room, when they had just told me about, Mallory passing away and Minnie still being alive, in this room that felt absolutely hopeless. Like there was zero hope in this room at that moment in time. I had just started praying and just started sharing who Jesus was with these nurses, with these emergency room doctors. And after they had wrapped up talking with me, they all gave me a hug and, said that we're here for you. We're here for you. And at the end, the emergency room surgeon kind of pulled me aside and said, Josh, hey, we're never going to know why this happened, and my heart is with you. But I just want to let you know that after you sharing about Jesus and sharing about who he actually is, I was going to church as a kid, but just kind of fell into college life and busyness, and God hasn't been a part of my life, and
even in college, as a doctor, we're taught all of these things that, God's not really in it. It's just all our, we control everything that happens. But after hearing you share about Jesus and after hearing about the hope that you have and the peace that you have right now, I just want to tell you, and I don't know the name, and if this reaches that person and this, and this is like, oh yeah, that's me, I'd love to connect with you again. But this doctor goes, because of this, I am going to start taking my faith seriously, and I'm going to start going to church, and I'm really going to try to understand who this real Jesus, who this real God is. And he's like, and I just want to let you know that. And, I was already crying more than I have ever cried in my life. And when he shared that, somehow I had more tears to cry. And I just cried and cried and cried. And I was like, yeah, God loves you and he's here for you. And he's always been there. And he's always going to be. And he just wants this relationship with you. So that was just the one of many conversations that I had. And another one that I'll share really quickly is in the NICU, there was, and I don't know if you remember this, Caleb, but there was a baby who had been abandoned by his mom and dad. I think it was just not a good situation, and they had the baby and they just left the baby there and abandoned the baby. This baby didn't have any activity, no brain activity. They were pretty close to pulling the plug on this baby. And I remember one day in the midst of our tragedy, we were just singing. I don't even know what song it was, but we were just singing and just bringing praise and worship to God and just, crying and weeping. And I remember the nurse came in and normally when the nurse comes in, it's time for us to kind of, be quiet and like, okay, maybe we need to move it into a waiting room or into a different area, and we can, still sing and worship out there. And so this nurse comes in and we all, start to get quiet, and she goes, guys, we really need you to keep singing. There's a baby in the room next to us that hasn't shown much sign of life. But as you guys have been singing, his vitals have started to show improvement. And we're like, okay, coincidence? I mean, maybe it could have been. And we're like, okay, well, we'll keep singing and see what happens. So we kept singing, and they're like, you can sing louder if you want. And we're like, okay, we haven't really been told we can sing louder yet. So we're like, okay, we're going to sing. And we had some people of worship in there who led us, and we were singing and loud and louder and louder and louder. And as we were singing, this baby's vitals, started to improve and improve and improve. And they were a day away from letting this baby go. And I don't want to say giving up on its life, but they had tried everything else. There was nothing else they could do. And the more and more we prayed and worshiped and sang these songs, his vitals just kept improving and improving and improving. And I don't fully know what happened, after we left, but I know that when we left, this baby was still alive and was still functioning and was improving and improving and improving. And, we didn't know the why. We didn't know why this happened. Maybe the why was because we needed to impact this baby's life. And now maybe this baby is 3 years old and is a living miracle and is a testimony to God's goodness. Maybe that's why this happened. And so to cling to those, like, okay, maybe this is why, helps a lot and helps with the healing process. And yeah, I have many more stories that I could share, but I think those are the two that impacted me probably the most.
Yeah, that's really good. Those 4 days in the hospital were the realest moments of my life, and I experienced life. I tell people this all the time. I've never felt more alive than in that hospital, of just so in touch with not only who I was, but also the people around me and who God was, because it was like, this is what I tell people about those 4 days, is when you walked into the hospital and you were there specifically for Josh or Mal or Minnie, you were just who you were. You were, if you're angry, you're angry. If you're sad, you were sad. If you were happy, you were happy. And nobody was upset that anybody was these things. Like, I remember, like, there's people laughing at jokes because Mallory is a funny person while, like, I'm bawling my eyes out. And, like, I don't care. Like, it was the realest form of community that I've ever experienced. And just want to share this to the general listener, that within your tragedy, you have an opportunity to create relationships out of tragedy that are more real, that are more deep, that are more intimate than you can really find anywhere else. Like, good times produce, like, good friends, but, like, bad times create real friendship.
Creates family.
And creates family. And so we're going to do a part 2 because this story is not over. There is a lot of hope yet to be shared, but to just break it up and to make it easier for you to listen to, this is the end of this podcast. So thank you for listening this far. I hope that you tune into part 2 of this. Josh, thank you so much for sharing that part of it. Zach, any closing remarks?
I've got questions, but I'll save them for part 2.
Awesome.
Awesome. Zach will actually talk in part 2. But love you. Thank you for sharing that or listening to this. Please share it. This story has impacted so many lives already. It's going to continue to impact lives because God doesn't waste anything. There's no insignificance in the kingdom of God. This is real life. Dreams don't always work out, but God is always moving and he's always working. So love you guys. Tune in for part 2.